Hello YouTube, this is Neon. I'm going to be talking today about my experience moving to Skid Row, which is just outside of downtown Los Angeles. So, I'm going to read in Webster's dictionary the definition of Skid Row for y'all. I hope I'm not insulting your intelligence. Okay, I'm stalling. I'm still looking for the word. Skid Row, a section of a city frequented by vagrants, derelicts, etc. That kind of sounds like a mean definition, but it's somewhat accurate. So, I moved to Los Angeles in early 2004, in January. I stayed with a guy in Hollywood for about a week. Did not work out. From there I moved to a motel for about 2 weeks. I came to LA in a beat up old Cadillac Seville. And that's basically the bottom end Cadillac, if I'm correct. And it was old. And $400 I had borrowed from a doctor friend of mine, who I paid back with interest. Shortly after moving to LA, I began to make money doing petitions. And so the dude who I stayed with for a week, briefly I received my mail there, and he recommended me to move somewhere in downtown LA off of 7th Street. It was on 7th Street, this particular hotel. And I had this really bad feeling, like, this is not good. What he is recommending is not good. But it was so cheap. Even though I was just barely making money, I didn't want to take no risks and try to move in Hollywood or move anywhere that actually would cost money. So I moved there. The way it worked was I went there and they kind of looked at me and they were like, well, we have a room on the 6th floor. The building was 6 floors. I went up there. This was after being nauseated by the stink. The hotel stunk terribly. I walk into this room on the 6th floor, turn on the light. There's a roach on each wall. Even though the room is empty and it's fairly clean, there's a roach on each wall. And they kind of scamper. So I'm assuming they just hung out there in between eating at the neighbor's house. Because the room was clean, wasn't no food in that room. So I was like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? It was kind of like do or die. And I remember telling myself, well, you know, you can make it work here, or you can just be grateful that you're on the 6th floor and you can always jump. That was my thought. When I walked into the building, the smell was so bad. It was just awful. They ended up putting me on the 2nd floor, so jumping was out the question. Shortly after I moved in, I was making good money. Briefly. So it was like I just slept there. I paid to keep my car parked. I only had the car briefly, but paid to keep my car safely parked and just really slept there. I didn't really get to know too many people that first year that I stayed in that hotel. It was an SRO, single room occupancy. So I was in a little 98-foot square room, which is basically like a jail cell size. Except I was alone. Jail cells, you got 2 people in that tiny room. And it had a tiny little sink. We had to use communal restrooms on each floor. That was tough. Sometimes they was occupied or maybe didn't work. Some of the restrooms might have a restroom, just a toilet and maybe a sink. And others might be just a shower. In one shower, I remember that this woman, she would leave her tampons, tampons. And I could tell where she was at in her menstrual cycle by how much blood was on the tampon. I didn't have no choice but to use that. Either you got to go to another floor, which is really inconvenient, or you got to take the shower that's available. So what I would do to get back at whoever this uncouth woman was, that I would take her tampon and I would just leave it right outside the door. Yes, I would touch it. I would touch it, and And I remember when the blood went to where just like a little spot, I was like, oh, thank God, I'm going to have to see this for about a month. There were lots of fights, I'm sure there was lots of drug use. One of the craziest things to see was somebody literally walking down the street smoking crack. Just walking down the street hitting a pipe. I was just like, whoa. At the time I wasn't sure what they was hitting, but I knew it wasn't legal. I knew that. Later I found out it was crack. Skid Row in downtown LA, by the way, it's its own neighborhood. It takes up about a square mile. So you have downtown LA with the skyscrapers. Then you have, I guess, old downtown. And then there's like, now there's Gallery Road because all the yuppies have moved down there. And then the so-called gentrification of LA. And then you have Skid Row. So it's less than a mile from the skyscrapers. From there, I made a lot of money. At one point I had about $13,000 saved up. And I kind of had a mental breakdown and didn't know what to do. So I started going to acting class, right? Because I'm in LA. So I spent most of my money in acting class. By the time I ran out, I knew I could not go back to work. So I got on GR, and then I moved into the Skid Row Housing Trust. Now, their buildings are cleaner and they're safer, particularly on the inside of the buildings. But you still have a lot of drug use on the streets, sometimes shootings, lots of fights. I've seen lots of fights. I've seen people get boards broken on them twice. I've seen quite a few other nasty fights on the street. It was tough living there. There's beautiful people that live there. There's people who really just don't know how to function in the world, but they don't do drugs. And they do their best. They're good people. They're honest. They might be on public assistance. Not everybody is. The only other thing that was kind of interesting was that I got sick when I moved, not in Skid Row Housing Trust, but when I moved into the first hotel that was privately owned. And it's the only time in my life I can remember vomiting and diarrhea-ing at the same time. I mean, it was coming out of both ends. I was so sick. I caught something in that hotel. I read an article about the hotel that it was ruled to be like a slum under whatever the laws that govern that, and that the owner, who was from Australia, he served time in prison, and then he was kicked out of the country. They sent him back to Australia. When I moved in, I guess it wasn't directly a slum because I don't think there was any murders that happened in the building. There were some murders that happened outside the building. Thankfully to God, I would show up when the murder was either the body had been taken away already, and there may be one lady who was stabbed to death, her blood was still there, and the detectives was still there. Another dude who, I don't know if this guy survived, he was attacked with a box cutter. They had cleaned off his blood already, but I heard that he bled profusely and that he was not expected to survive. But I don't know what happened with him. It was interesting because the wife of a dude who lived in that hotel, in that SRO, privately owned, she had caused the fight between her loved one and this other dude who lived there. And when he attacked the dude who lived there with the box cutter, somehow, even though you could see his neck had been cut, it didn't really cut him severely. And he managed to get the box cutter out of the dude's hands and sliced him up badly. And the dude who was telling me the story, although I heard it probably from many people, but he was like, yeah, he was slicing and dicing. He was slicing and dicing. And apparently it was a lot of blood because they had to clean off a ton of the sidewalk was soaked in water when I got there. So that's about it. I guess that's the most titillating part of moving to Skid Row. It's sad. It's sad. I don't think anybody deserves to live like that. We have so many rich people in this country. And if people would be more willing to share, people wouldn't have to live in those standards. Because obviously in Skid Row, there's a lot of people who are homeless and have nothing, you know. It's safer now because of the so-called gentrification and yuppies. They're enforcing the law more, so I don't think that during the daytime people are going to be walking around shooting stuff in their neck, which I've seen. I saw one dude shot up another dude in his neck, and I'm just like looking at this like, whoa. And dudes sitting there, you know, smoking their crack pipe or whatever they was smoking, walking out there. Not much of that stuff goes on during the day, I don't believe, but I have not been down there anytime recently. But it's more law abiding now. I've seen women be attacked because they had taken most of their partner's crack. They smoked most of his crack. So he's beating her up, and once I went and got a guard, so the guard stopped him. And another time he was hitting her. He wasn't continuously hitting her, but he would smack her and tell her to move her hand so he could smack her again without her protecting herself. And another time I saw a dude basically drag his girl behind a dumpster, and I started yelling. I called the police, and someone was like, no, it's cool, you know, she smoked his crack, he's just, like, that was normal behavior. So best wishes. If you like this video, like, subscribe, share, comment, commercials, recommend this video. Thank you. Best wishes.